Well, it wouldn't be a Newcastle day without news. And boy, have we got news for you guys today. Paul Mitchell's tenure at Newcastle comes to an end. A respected football director joined Newcastle as a sporting director in July 24. His appointment was part of a broader restructuring at the club following the departure of Dan Ashworth. Mitchell had previously held roles at Monaco, RB Leipzig, Tottenham Hotspur, where he was known for his expertise in player recruitment and squad building. During his time at Newcastle, Mitchell played a key role in shaping the club's transfer strategy. Under his leadership, Newcastle won the Carabao Cup in March 25, marking their first major trophy in over 70 years. Additionally, the club secured Champions League qualification in 25-26, further cementing their rise in European football. However, his tenure was relatively short-lived. On May 27th, 25, Newcastle announced that Mitchell would leave the club by mutual consent at the end of June 25. His departure coincided with the exit of Darren Eales, CEO, as he was stepping down due to health reasons. The club expressed gratitude for Mitchell's contributions, and he himself stated that he was leaving at a time that was right for both him and Newcastle. Despite his exit, Mitchell's impact on Newcastle recruitment and success during his tenure remains significant. That's a statement. And I suppose, the way you look at it, the way we see it is going to be different, because there's going to be lots of people out there asking the question, what's he done in his, under 12 months at the club? Now, for somebody who looks at academy football, the way I do, I can see a hell of a lot that he has brought to the club regarding a youth setup. But I was going to ask you, the timing's never great for these type of news outings, and it first come. I first saw it this morning. Then I saw it on Sky Sports that it was confirmed, because sometimes you just have to question what was out there. And obviously, I waited until I saw it from Newcastle itself before obviously throwing it out there in our chat. I mean, I know you've got probably a little bit of a different thought pattern to me, but we knew that PIF were there at the end of the season, the last game of the season at home, where they were having a sit-down conversation with Eddie. And obviously that included Paul Mitchell, I would have thought. So is this something where the spat that we saw last summer, do you think it's continued? Is this something that Paul Mitchell just you can't see eye to eye with the head coach? What do you think it is?
I think that's patently obvious, isn't it? What I would say in Mitchell's defence is what you've just alluded to, which is the youth recruitment and the building up of the academy, which, by the way, is essentially where he made his name in Monaco. He wasn't buying any proven players at Monaco. He was buying them all for the youth team, and they did eventually come through. Did a great job. So, thank you for everything he's done there. But it was absolutely apparent from day one that him and Eddie didn't see eye to eye. And it was then up to PIF to decide who they were going to back. At the time, this was before Darren Eales took ill. They obviously took Darren Eales' side of things, if you like, whereas Eddie had complete backing from Amanda before she was shown the door. Probably rightly so for the reasons we've discussed a million times now, sadly. But Eddie has obviously, you're saying Paul Mitchell would have been there on Sunday. I'm not so sure.
Right.
I think Eddie's been there with the chairman and said, look, dead simple. Either I decide who's coming in, or you find another coach to work under Paul Mitchell. And I think that's what's happened.
I mean, qualifying for Champions League and getting the domestic trophy and everything else
without them having spent a penny
exactly.
in 3 windows.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of clout goes behind Eddie Howe's coach now, doesn't there?
Exactly. He has got the whip hand and power to his elbow. Howe power, child of the 60s. Never mind flower power. Howe power. He has said, right, you know, it's not a problem if you want your director of football to oversee everything. That's great, but I'm afraid it's not for me. So I will take my leave and move on. And PIF have said, which would we rather have? And they have decided the one man who can take us forward is Eddie Howe. Now, I applaud what they've done, but now it's up to Eddie to continue the good work, and a lot of people have reservations, myself included, by the way, in terms of what he can do when he's got a really good squad of players to choose from, as opposed to having his hands tied behind his back all the time. I trust him implicitly, but I could be proven wrong. Who knows? Time will tell. Everything is results based.
Absolutely.
I think it goes back to the Austrian training camp last summer.
Yeah.
When all the rumours were coming out, and it was apparent ever since then that Darren Eales was taking Mitchell's side, for want of a better expression. There was the public reconciliation immediately prior to the Japan tour, and everything was supposed to be hunky-dory then. But then we had the gay debacle, when lots of people, lots of friends and members of the channel were all saying how it was Eddie's stubbornness, spitting the dummy out, I want gay or nobody, which I think is utter nonsense. Wouldn't have happened. I do believe he may have said, if I'm having a centre half, I want him or nobody. But certainly that doesn't preclude any other positions that we would have been having. I think that was then when PIF decided to show their hand and where they were at the time, which was to say, right, well, no, we've appointed Paul Mitchell, and we're going to give him the clout. And I think as we went through January without getting anybody, when I do believe we had money available, I think there must have been a power struggle still going on then. But Eddie's got the whip hand.
Yeah.
And he's decided to show it. And by the way, haven't we seen a bit of that lately in the press conferences? When he's been just slightly more prickly than the lovely jubbly teddy bear Eddie that we'd seen before that.
Yeah, the gentleman.
He's still a consummate gentleman.
Absolutely.
But he's just saying, look, I might look like a teddy bear, but you ain't going to push me around.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing I was going to come to. Is it the fact that Mitchell's saying, let's get rid of one of the stars? Yeah, I mean, listen, this is all, hypothetical.
It's all speculation.
It's all, yeah, absolutely. It's all hypothetical chat. We don't know anything that's happened apart from it's by mutual consent. I mean, Darren Lee
that famous mutual consent.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we talk about is it Mitchell that's the problem? Obviously, he fell out with Steve Nixon because he was talking about it wasn't at the right standard. Our
Yeah. Yeah,
scouting network.
I mean, have you ever heard such a crazy statement as that? When you look at the recruitment that had been done, and by the way, Eddie was quite forthright then, at the time, when the spat was going on, to say, right, Bruno Botman,
Yeah.
Isaac, this is substandard, is it?
Yeah.
And rightly so, by the way, rightly so.
Well, he's got Champions League 2 out of 3 seasons, and we only missed out on the second season because of obviously Man U doing the dirty over City in the cup final.
And a lot of VAR decisions as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And isn't it funny how VAR came to our rescue?
This weekend.
Time round.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the blowing of a whistle, early whistle. Anyway, let's just have a look at how it broke to us this morning on Sky. Hopefully, you guys can hear this.
Right, some breaking news to bring you now from Newcastle. The club's sporting director, Paul Mitchel, will leave the club by mutual consent at the end of June, just a year after taking the job. He joined the club in July 2024, reuniting him with Newcastle CEO Darren Eales, who'd previously recruited him to Tottenham Hotspur in 2014. We know that due to health reasons, Eales will be stepping down as CEO in the near future. But this is what Paul Mitchel has had to say. He said, "I'd like to thank everyone at Newcastle for their support over the last year, including Eddie Howe, Becky Langley, the players, staff, owners and fans. It has been an honour to be part of the club and to work with some incredible people." He says, "I'm leaving at a time that is right for me and the club, particularly with Darren Eales, someone who I've worked so closely with in my career, moving on soon. The club is in great hands on and off the pitch and is in a fantastic position to continue building." But there we go, the breaking news from Newcastle. The club's sporting director, Paul Mitchel, will leave the club by mutual consent at the end of June.
And obviously going on to the statement that was out there from the club. And again, it goes through what we were talking before. Due to health reasons, Darren will be stepping down. And is it the fact that, Darren Eales going, has that been another reason for Paul Mitchell now saying, well, listen, it was Darren that recruited me. If I'm not seeing eye to eye with anybody else within the board, because my vision is a bit different to what Newcastle are looking for, is it something that, they're looking at? I mean, is it something to do with Darren Eales leaving that Paul Mitchell is?
Here's the thing. Here's my speculation, which is all it is. And I'm thinking that conversation between Eddie Howe and the chairman maybe didn't even just revolve around Paul Mitchell per se as sporting director. Maybe he wanted it in black and white. Can you remember when we did the hierarchy graphic?
Yeah.
Showing that effectively, as far as PIF were concerned, because it was them that produced it, it was Darren Eales as chief executive, and beneath him, down one of the legs, was Paul Mitchell, sporting director, and under Paul Mitchell was Eddie Howe, Betty Langley. Is that what they call her? I think it is. Becky Langley, yeah. Excuse my ignorance, ladies. And the head of recruitment. And there's an interesting point in the chat there, a very good point by Luke Elm. Doesn't Bunce come hand in hand with Mitchell?
Yeah.
I guess we'll be seeing him gone as well then. Now, there's a funny thing, because I do remember, particularly, if you remember the Crystal Palace game last season, when Eales, Mitchell and Bunce it panned to them on the stand when we were getting beat at
Getting
Palace,
hammered, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
and it almost looked like they had smirks on their face.
Yeah.
And so the three of them could have. Now, then Eddie has been very, very complimentary about Steve Bunce, this season. Whenever injuries and so on have been referred to, he's always been highly praiseworthy of Bunce. Was that PR? Was that Eddie being Mr. Nice Guy? Or might it in fact be that he has learned something from Steve Bunce? And the proof of that pudding will be if Steve Bunce does stay. Because I'm pretty sure that would have been somewhere in the conversation as well with the chairman. Now, I've got a kind of inkling that Eddie is quite impressed with what Steve Bunce has done. And if that's the case, and the injuries this season would certainly appear to back that up, then that's something we've got to be grateful for Paul Mitchell for. For bringing him in. But I think Eddie will have, at the weekend, he will have set in stone the circumstances under which he is prepared to continue working at Newcastle United. And by the way, he could leave right now and get any job he wanted. Any job.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I was one of Paul Mitchell's big favours. I did look at Paul Mitchell's CV, and I've followed him when he was at MK Dons because, like I say, you could see what the lad was about. He'd got a really good CV, and I was all for it. But obviously, there is definitely something that's just not right now. For me, it's the timing that I get a little bit shaken up by. And is it the fact that now, like I said, it's Eddie obviously will have the reins. Is it 5 days now before the window opens on that first window of opportunity to get somebody in? We've seen that Eddie wants to act quickly. He's had this meeting with PIF. There's lots been talked about. It just seems a strange time for me for this to come out. Now, I looked at Mitchell when he was walking around the pitch. Didn't look a happy boy considering what we've achieved this season. When I say he didn't look a happy boy, he wasn't, I'm not saying he would have been jumping up in the air with the other crew, with the coaches and stuff like that. At the end of the day, he's part of the board. But you always look at somebody's body language, and it was as if there was something bothering him at that time. Now, again, I'm not saying that he wasn't part of the meeting that was done literally directly after the parade around the pitch. He'd obviously got something in mind. He put something to the board, and the board have said to Eddie Howe, I mean, we all know, and Paul Mitchell has stated this in the past, that it was £50 million for Gay, no more. He wasn't moving any closer to the monies that Crystal Palace wanted at the time, and we all know that Crystal Palace moved the goalposts further away from us in the end. Was that the knife in the back between Howe and Mitchell? Has it been a lingering problem ever since?
With regard to the timing, as I say, immediately post-match, come here, a word.
Yeah.
And had that game and the other games, as it turns out, gone the other way around, I think that conversation could have been very, very different.
Different outcome altogether.
Eddie has decided strategically, I will never have a better time than this.
Yeah.
And so he's gone, all guns blazing, cards on the table. Take your pick, sir.
Yeah. I mean, Sir Galahad says here, Eddie knows what the squad needs the most. In the gaffer we trust.
Correct.
Remember Ashley Eada when Keegan got Zisco. I mean, it is a strange feeling to think that, you know, we thought we'd got to the other side of this. And like I said, it seems as if Sky Sports and the club are trying to bring Darren Eales' name in, not as an excuse for Mitchell leaving, but they're trying to obviously put a little bit of a blanket over any potential words that have been said between the two. And it's as if, like, you know, because Darren Eales is going, you know, they're trying to say that Paul Mitchell is also going now because of that. And I think that's BS, because we've all known that Darren Eales was stepping down as CEO months ago. So why has Paul Mitchell waited till now if that's the case? And like I say, I've got a feeling it's obviously something to do of the aftermath of the conversation that was had post the Everton game. And like you say, Eddie Howe holds all the cards now. You know, he's got the power. He's got the weight behind what he wants. And listen, I agree with the sentiment. You know, I just feel disappointed because, like I say, it's typical Newcastle fan, isn't it? You go on the highs, you go on the lows, you get back up after a defeat because you rely on other teams to do you a favour. My emotions on Sunday were all over the shop, and I found it really difficult to actually feel elated because of, you know, I was in such an emotional turmoil at the time, knowing that, you know, I'd seen on my refresher page that we dropped to 6th, and I'm like, God, well, you know, this is just, it's typical us. And then all of a sudden you get on them highs and you're thinking, wow, we got 5 days before the transfer window. I'm going to be in Turkey. My phone is going to be set to, you know, all the news settings and everything else, and getting ready for all the big names that are going to be coming through the club doors. And then this, and you're like, oh God, here we go. This is another hit.
I'll tell you another reason that the timing could be very significant in terms of the Sunday meeting. If Eddie's been looking at the news and seeing that all of a sudden Man United are in for Mbeumo and, you know, da-di-da-di-da, which is, I believe, who he wants. And if Mitchell hasn't been that convinced, I would rather only pay 20 million for a work in progress kind of thing. And Eddie's now putting it, no, we want first team ready players. Go and get them, or we've got a problem. And humming and hawing, and he's I think, in terms of the timing being bad, I think the timing has been perfect, because it's given, from Eddie's point of view, I'm talking about, it's given him the perfect opportunity to say, right, this is it, take it or leave it. Now, how that will affect, obviously we're not privy to what went on in the meeting. Could this affect his standing with PIF as we go forward? I don't know. As I say, results will dictate.
Yeah, Bulky's put a decent point here. Look, it could be that we've got a new CEO in place and they just wanted their own man in the role.
Well, that's true, but what I'm saying is I'm more or less convinced now that when the new CEO does come in, and when the DOF, if a new DOF is appointed, it will be on Howe's terms, in terms of the hierarchy, as opposed to the hierarchy as was depicted by PIF when Mitchell was appointed.
I mean, it is an interesting one. Geordie Dan saying here, Bunce, you always seen interacting with the players, and even Eddie, you never saw it with Mitchell. Hence, I believe Bunce will be staying. So, you see, I agree with that. I mean, apart from you saw in the training ground where inside where you'd see Mitchell going around a couple of players, but again, you don't know whether that's just, PR stuff. You don't know what the interactions were between the Mitchell and the rest of the crew. It did seem as though he was a man on a solo mission at times, or that's what it felt like. I just find it, I find it just strange. I just do. I just think, like I say, it's just a typical day in the life of a Newcastle fan. Why hire a DOF?
Because you hire a DOF to work under the coach when you've got a coach as good as Eddie Howe.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I just found his demeanour a bit different at Newcastle compared to what I've seen Mitchell like at other clubs. But he was the power boy, He was the one who was.
He thought he had the power.
Yeah, and I do think.
And I think he did have. I think he did have. I think with Eels, he was, and Eddie dug his toes in, or dug his heels in, should I say, and said, right, let's go 10 rounds, boy, see who wins.
Yeah, Tim, here, look, a lot boils down to whether you want a DOF to have the final say on some player signings or not. If the manager is not comfortable with that, then something has to give. Steve Nixon, like I say, when Steve Nixon and Eddie were obviously there's a lot of talk about Eddie's nephew, whether they've got or had anything to do with this as well. There's going to be lots of rumours. There's going to be a hell of a lot of rumours. I think that for me now, the proof will be, what type of players are we getting in? We've all heard that Eddie Howe likes the type of players like DCL and stuff like that. It does make you wonder whether Dominic Calvert-Lewin could be our backup striker going forward. It's going to be an interesting few days.
There's Foxy in. If Mitchell doesn't have the control he should, then he's probably right to move on somewhere else. His reputation stays high with him being here for our best ever season, and he's improved the youth massively. Can't argue with a
absolutely.
word of that.
And the girls' football team, he's got involved with. So, I agree with that. Tim's second one here. The scout seems to do a great job. He apparently identified Bruno before Howe was at the club. Seems to be they should be working in tandem. Yeah, so cool.
Stephen Hart is in. PIF don't make moves like this without someone in line to take over. And on that note, I'm pleased to announce it's me. I start July win. I start with Win as my chief scout. I didn't see that.
Fabulous.
By the way, anybody who wants to come on and have your say, have your two penneth, get on the show live, just follow the link in the chat. I'll put it in the chat again. Jump
Darren
on.
Bale. So either
your phone and
yeah.
have
So
your
it says
two
here,
penneth.
Eddie's in charge of transfers, or a new DF will come in halfway through the summer and have a grapple with Eddie again. And that's the problem now, isn't it? That's what I said about the timing. If they have got somebody in line, obviously been working in the background, like Mitchell did, apparently. It was like a case of what has been earmarked, and what type of players are we looking at? I mean, obviously Mitchell is renowned for players that aren't known, and not what you class as Premier ready. And is that the big thing about Eddie? Is Eddie just demanding Premier ready or Premier proven players to come into the fold for next season?
Here's the thing. If you remember when Dirty Dan went to Man United, the first name that we were linked with was Dougie Freedman. And Eddie came out publicly then and said how he was asked about him at one of the press conferences.
Mm.
And he says, I've got a lot of respect for Dougie Friedman. And I wonder if that name could resurface.
Yeah. Umar, can you hear me?
Me.
Yeah, go on then, mate. So you have your say. What's your feelings on the situation with Mitchell?
Yeah, just didn't expect that. Probably unthinkable, he wasn't even here a year. I don't know if Howe and Mitchell got on with certain things, if Howe wanted his own targets, and just don't know what's going to happen going forward.
I think it was pretty apparent that they didn't get on.
Yeah.
The question is, who should have the power, the director of football or the coach?
Yeah. Who do you think should have the power?
Eddie Howe, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a very it's a difficult one to actually say who has the power, because they both live and die by the sword, if you like. If you're relying very much on just the DOF to bring in players to fit a system, then the system should be already set in motion. At this present moment in time, and I've said this while we've been watching games, to me, I don't think Eddie Howe has a system of play fully yet. I think Eddie Howe still needs to work on certain areas to get the best out of the 4-3-3 that he wants, and to have this 4-3-3 running fluidly without issues. And I mean that by keeping hold of the ball. At this present moment in time, we're very much on the lesser body when it comes to possession football, apart from when we're playing against teams that do the low block against us. Well, I mean, to be fair, we do the same against bigger teams. We just go on the low block and you see possession football just being played in front of you. What Eddie Howe needs to do now is he needs to bring in players that work the system that he wants. Now, like I said, whether he doesn't have that relationship with Mitchell or trust, and I think trust's a big thing with some of maybe Mitchell's targets. I don't know, because like I say, it's all speculation. We haven't got a clue what's gone on, but there's certainly something that's not happy. There's somebody that has put a spanner in the pipework somewhere along the line. For me, Umar, it's about timing. I'm just a bit worried about the timing of this. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the timing. The window is due to open in it 1st of June.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen? It's apparently Sky have announced that Eddie Howe has full control of the recruiting.
Well, like I said, you live by the sword and you die by the sword, don't you? And I think if Eddie Howe makes a ruck of his recruitment now, then you can't blame anybody else apart from Eddie, can you? That's the thing. That's what I said. But with him doing what he's done now, if that's what's happened, if he's got that much control, and I mean, I'm just going to go on Andy Ford's description here. Does Eddie Howe have that much power? This is very worrying, considering too much power, considering this was meant to be a transformative summer transfer window. Obviously, the transfer meeting with the chairman went tits up.
Well, you see, I couldn't disagree with that more. I don't think it did go tits up. I think Eddie has said, I know what I want. This is what I want. He's not delivering it. Make your mind up.
Which one of us you want?
Which one of us do you want to make that decision? So I think it went anything but tits up. I think it was Eddie putting his cards on the table, saying, back me or sack me. Simple. Or back me and I'll walk. Or I'll walk.
Team Season saying, Gary, this is how Newcastle is going to be run now. Cult of Eddie Howe, back to overspending and running out of money again. Sorry, I'm solid behind the director of football, because without one, we are screwed.
Well,
So, I mean, like I said, I was totally behind Mitchell, like I say, because of his CV. But if he wanted total control without communication to the head of, the head coach, then there's something wrong with that. Because again, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? You've got to have something that works for the club. It can't be one or the other. It has to work for the progression of the club going forward. And like you said, Darwin, I mean, is this the right time before the transfer window? Because at the end of the day, if somebody's not happy, the director of football's not happy, he's got a 3-year contract, or he signed a 3-year contract. So Mitchell could say, I'll bring in who I want. I'll sell who I want. You know what I mean? He could put the club, because he's not happy, in the mire, if he's not got the right mentality for it. So maybe it is the right time to say goodbye.
Anything else to say, Wilma, before we move on?
Just don't know what's going to happen then going forward. So we'll have all the control now Mitchell's gone.
Right. Well, time will tell. We'll see what we will see. So thanks for coming on, pal.
Cheers,
we'll
Umar.
see you again.
Yeah, no bother, yeah.
Take care, buddy. Matt Thompson puts a good point. If we keep losing top-class staff for whatever reason, we will find it super hard to land big names in the future. I mean, there's some clout behind that, I suppose. But are they coming to the club?
Hang on.
Are they coming?
If we keep on losing top-class staff, right, so what we're talking about Dan Ashworth, who chose to leave, and Paul Mitchell, who Eddie hasn't got on with. It's not like a rampant disease. It's 2 people.
Well, you could put Amanda Stavely in there as well, couldn't you?
Well, yeah, you could.
But what I'm saying to you is, you've just named, we've just named 3 people there. Does it shout instability behind the scenes?
Not
to you?
It doesn't.
Not to you?
Not at all, no.
Right. See, to me, it does. If I was looking at, we're talking about, future sponsors probably being on the doorstep here. And when you've got all this going on, to me, it shouts there's unrest in the building somewhere. And that isn't a club that's stable going forward.
Okay, so here's the thing. I don't disagree for 1 minute that there has been unrest in the building. And as we've said 1,000,000 times on this show, you cannot move forward. No football club moves forward unless everybody's pulling in the same direction.
Boki's in the room.
Boki, how are you doing, sir?
How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, good. Can you hear us, lads?
Yeah, cool, mate. Carry on.
Do you think now whoever comes in is going to definitely be below Eddie? There's no chance they're going to bring somebody in above his head, is there?
That's my reading of the situation, definitely.
I mean, are they going to bring somebody else in now? I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Is it? That's what I said. It's the timing of it.
I mean, I put in the chat. Do you think it'll be more head of recruitment rather than a director of football that they bring in, or even promote Steve?
Well, the whole point is that if you are appointing a DOF Supremo, head of recruitment is one of the positions that goes under him, and he is on the same kind of level as the coaches within the organisation, because the DOF is responsible for all aspects of playing.
Yeah.
And so the DOF would be responsible for appointing the head of recruitment. Now then, Mitchell never did that. And that could have been an ongoing battle between him and Eddie, saying, look, I want to bring this kid in as head of recruitment. And Eddie saying, listen, I'm quite happy with Steve Nixon and War Andy, etc., etc. And that could have been an ongoing thing. Whilst Darren Eales was there and pulling the strings before he got ill, maybe Mitchell was getting more of the backing in that regard.
Do you also think it might influence the Wilson decision as well? Do you think Eddie's going to have more of a say over contracts?
Yeah, well, according to it, Leeds have come in. The representatives have spoken to Wilson about a free transfer. But I mean, we all, I mean, again, I go on body language a lot of the time. When you look at players, when Eddie was asked about Wilson in his post-match interview, you know, yes, he's got a lot of admiration for the lad and what he's done for Newcastle in the past, and you know the way he shows himself as a professional person. Even though he's gone through turmoil, and obviously, if anybody hasn't watched it, there's a really good interview with him where he talks about mental health issues. Where obviously, when he was 12, he looked at losing his life, and you know it's a bit of a shocker. And that's what I said. You know, these guys are only human beings at the end of the day. They're not robots. And you know, when a person goes, for me, it's about having a relationship with your players. Now, Eddie's come out and said he has a relationship with the players, but not all players. Now, again, you know, what type of relationship does that mean? Is it the language barrier? You know, is it something that sometimes you just don't see eye to eye with everybody you work with? That's what I'm trying to say. Your personality just doesn't go across the board.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, he said it in his interview.
No, from Eddie.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, I think it was his post-match interview.
It was post-match interview. He says he has a relationship with the players, but not all the players. So, like I said, he had really good points to talk about Callum Wilson. Now, whether that means that Callum Wilson is going to be offered a further contract, I don't think so. Not where we want to go. But like I said, you know, Eddie would be an absolute fool to close the door on that because,
pay to play.
Absolutely. I mean, you're not going to come out and say, no, that's it, he's done, because there might be a point, you know, in a week's time when the window opens and the target that maybe Eddie was looking for isn't available. I'm talking Liam Delap now, because obviously Chelsea are in for him, you know, Man U are in for him. There's a number of clubs vying for all the same players that we've been linked to. So, you know, to close your door on every availability, I think would be silly for the club going forward. But I mean, I think Wilson needs to go.
Sporky, before you go out on your shooting party.
About what?
You're looking very smart there.
Yeah, he is, isn't he?
In your country gent attire.
Yeah. General thoughts are, I think it maybe makes the summer a bit easier in that there's not going to be
no tussles
at the top. I think now it's obviously Eddie's in charge of all transfers and he's going to be able to get in who he wants, and I think that's the best way, to be honest. It gives him.
I agree.
You see, you die by the sword. So
and here we go. Tim's in the building. Hi, Tim.
Yeah, right, lads.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. That's a turn off for the books, like, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's like I said, there's never a dull day being a Castle fan, is there?
No, it's crazy. It's crazy.
So, just before we come on to you then, Tim, so Boki, is there any, I mean, you know, timing is the key thing here, isn't it? So, do you think then, obviously, during the conversations that were had between the board, PIF, and the coaching staff, there was obviously some type of agreement, an agreement to disagree about, future buys and sales. And that's where they've come to this mutual agreement about we go our separate ways.
I think, to be honest, Eddie was in such a strong position that he's probably just thought, wait, this is my chance. I'm going to go in and just say to them, this is how I want to run the club. Backers or sackers, basically. It's up to you guys.
Yeah, this is what me and Win were just saying. I mean, he has got the power the cards in his hand now, hasn't he?
100%.
I mean, like I say, it's the best season in my lifetime.
13 minutes make, eh?
Crazy, isn't it? Absolutely crazy. Emotion was amazing. Go on then, Tim. Just jump onto yourself then, mate. Your thoughts on the news breaking this morning?
I mean, on the face of it, like, I'm not massively surprised, really, when you actually think about it, when you go back to last summer. And I don't think anybody absolutely fully convinced that everything was set in place, do you know what I mean, going forward between the two. Obviously, you thought the summer was going to be the big test of that, and that's not going to happen now with them. But I think you've got to look at the role of director of football and what it is you want from that role and what we want from that role. So like that director of football is there to either sign players himself or at least some of the players, you know, have that autonomy to have the green light to sign it off and allow or essentially tell the manager to work with those players. Like I say, maybe not all of them, but some of them. Or if not that, then simply be a link between the manager and the board, who may not be on the same level in terms of football understanding, and that DOF can be the link between manager and board. Do you know what I mean? So that everyone's aligned. But I think it's quite obvious that Eddie Howe, like a lot of managers, does not want a DOF signing players without his say so. And I think that's kind of like common sense, really. You can fully understand that some managers, maybe abroad in particular, are happy with that. And that's, there's not necessarily a right or wrong way, but Eddie Howe wants to sign off the players himself. So once that's established, then you've got to then wonder, okay, well, what is the setup we have with Mitchell? If Mitchell can scout these players, then and great, and he can put these players forward to Eddie Howe, but if they are not aligned on the types of players they want, or Eddie Howe wants, because ultimately Eddie Howe is the one who's setting up the team, who's drawn up the tactics on match day, who's having to decide under pressure who to pick in the first 11, etc. So, and he's working with them one-on-one and working with these personalities in the dressing room. So, to me, common sense tells me that he has to have a huge say on who comes through the door for those reasons. So if they're not in tandem and not in sync, with the types of players they want, then really what is the point? There's no point in them carrying on and having any kind of struggles. And ultimately, Paul Mitchell, I think, or whoever it was, they shouldn't have hired Paul Mitchell without it being established with Eddie Howe in terms of, this is the structure we want. Are you happy to work with this? And you decide whether to go with Eddie Howe or, whether to hire a DOF and go that way. But it's obvious he's been hired without everything being settled, and they've had to then just catch up and resolve this. I think it's obvious as well that I think Eddie Howe clearly does have a good relationship with the board anyway. And I get the impression, that the chairman probably respects Howe, because Howe was there, before Paul Mitchell and helped get us out of the mire and helped in that January transfer window, when we signed Bruno, etc. So I think the chairman's probably looking at it and thinking, well, I kind of, I know how you operate anyway, and I trust you. So, if Paul Mitchell wants to be signing players, we're not going to be doing that. So what's the point? There was reports about Paul Mitchell kind of ruffling feathers when he came in as well, and perhaps his demeanour and the way he went about things didn't fit into the culture that the club has and Eddie Howe has. So, like, if that is the case, then again, it's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Craig Hope reported that he was saying to players in pre-season, you're going to go on a world-class journey with me, etc. And some of the players were a bit like, well, you've kind of just walked through the door. I'm already on a journey with the gaffer and the coaches. So, I think maybe he just wasn't the right fit as well, personality-wise.
Yeah, exactly.
And the board have then got to look at that as well. So if he has went in like that with like a bull in a china shop, that's not exactly wise on his part, is it?
Well, it was the statement, wasn't it, about the scouting system?
Yeah.
And
Not fit for purpose.
Not fit for purpose. I mean, that is scathing. Especially like you said, with the people that we'd brought through the door, none of them being big names, but all of them have been worth the cause, because they have moved Newcastle forward twofold. And like I said, some of these names I'd never heard of. And to be fair, they fitted in Eddie Howe's plan, the way he wants to play. It's still a work in progress. We know that. And that's what he needs going forward now. And obviously between the two of them, it does very much to me now sound as if Mitchell was the common denominator out of the rest of the team that wasn't happy with the current setup, and he hadn't got the the finger on the pulse as he wanted, maybe, or maybe that's what Darren Eales had promised him. Again, you don't know because this is a Darren Eales signing at the end of the day. Um, for me,
Yeah.
there seems to be as though Paul Mitchell is the odd one out in and amongst every other name that you mention. It's always Paul Mitchell that's coming forward and saying there's something wrong elsewhere within the club, and yet the club are making massive strides forward. So, what is wrong? You know what I mean? How bad is
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
if we've moved forward this much? I mean, to be fair, the only thing that I do get worried about now is all the hard work that's happened in the background regarding the academy, and how far we've moved forward with the academy lads. Is that going to go stagnant again? Because we all know, as much as I love Eddie Howe, he doesn't really give the academy players much of a look in. But the setup that we've got now on the youth side of it has moved majorly forward. I don't want that to stop now. Whoever comes in,
No,
whoever comes on board now, I want it to continue to grow to support the first team.
well, to
Have a
me
look
as
at
well, I think I'll just make two quick points. Sorry,
Yeah,
Win.
Go on.
Sorry, mate. So I think what I would say is before we had a director of football, we had Steve Nixon there, and Steve Nixon was apparently pushing for the likes of Bruno to be signed, before Eddie Howe had got his foot in the door. So we were working on a list that he had already formulated. So, like, to me, I look at it and I do wonder whether it's worth having a director of football in place if that director of football is not going to be signing players, which might work at some clubs, fine, but it's clear Mitchell wanted to do that, in my opinion. So it's been a mess to bring him in and then have him not. You sort of have that agreement in place with Eddie Howe, etc., and it's unfolded. So if Eddie Howe has got the final say, like most managers or a lot of managers have final say, then could you not keep or promote Steve Nixon, if you like, and give him a bit more responsibility? And in terms of the youth setup, like, I agree with you, Gary. I think that needs to be really looked at and preserved, because we need to carry that on. And whether it's Steve Nixon himself or whether it's hiring somebody else, a youth scout, to focus on that, I don't know. But that needs to be looked at. But do you need to bring in, or have this search again for somebody else, and then have this whole thing with boundaries and where we stand of the new director of football? Or do we not work with Steve Nixon and then the scouting team and then Eddie Howe? That's what I'm thinking. I mean, the only last thing I would say is, I think it is important in terms of player trading, and that, I do think we need to be kind of clever in the market when it comes to selling players as well. So, Gordon, for example, if we get a massive offer, maybe feels unfair to single him out. I'm just using him as an example. Sometimes you've got to maybe sell somebody to gain a big fee that you can spend on 2 or 3 players. So I kind of hope we have our head switched on still in that regard going forward. But yeah, I just think, is Steve Nixon maybe not a possibility instead of going around in circles again?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously Steve Nixon he's been there at the helm, like I say, from the start, hasn't he? And that's what I said. There's been a lot of question marks about his nephew, Eddie Howe's nephew, and what role does he have? Has he got too much say in the matters? And because of Eddie Howe's, situation, it's a strange one. Tiger,
Hello.
come on then, mate. How are you doing, dude? Come
I'm
and have
good,
your
I'm good.
views. How are you feeling?
Well, I finished work like an hour ago, and then I saw the group chat, and it was just like Mitchell's gone, and I was like, what? Like, what's happened now, right? And I was just like reading through it, and I was just like, it's like last summer all over again. Like, what's
Yeah.
going on? And like, we all slated Ashworth. Oh, he's a snake. He's gone Man United, whatever. And then we all hailed when Mitchell came. And then now he's gone. We're like, oh, thank God Mitchell's gone now. Like, what's up with this fan base? Like, why is no one questioning how now? You know, like on the pitch, he's done well.
Could it
I'm not.
be exactly? Could it be because he's just won a cup and qualified for the Champions League? I wonder if that's why they're not
No,
questioning how now.
but when I'm not questioning what he's done on the pitch. This is a separate issue. This is off pitch antics now. Like,
Yeah, he's done that without any recruitment at all.
yeah, I know, but it's like, then why do we keep hiring these director of footballs when they're just getting sacked the year after?
Well, I think that's exactly the conversation Eddie's had on Sunday.
Yeah, and look, I can't stay that long, but I just want to say my piece. My piece on this is I don't care about who the director of football is, right? I want to see results on the pitch. So my thing is there's someone needs to be right, regardless who's the director of football, because next season's going to be it's going to be hard, and you know what? Howe's going to be under a lot of pressure now because it's going to be his signings.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, so and it needs to work. So yeah, that's all I want to say. But something needs to stop here, like with the director of football. Like I don't know, maybe Howe just wants the full power, right? I don't know. We don't know
Well,
that. So.
I think that's it. I think that's it.
He wants
But
the full power, yeah.
Tiger, would you not want the person in the dressing room and setting up the tactics, etc., and picking the team? Would you not want that person, if he's competent? And I think it's fair to say we think Howe is competent. Would you not want that person's judgment in terms of what player out there will fit into the team versus somebody who isn't a manager, who isn't in the dressing room? Because I know where you're coming from, but it is kind of linked to the pitch. It is linked to what goes on in the pitch. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the person who's got first-hand kind of a seat on the front row as to how that will affect on the pitch really is the manager. And I think, ideally you would have two of them working together where they're both on the same page in terms of football and philosophies, teams, how they play, etc. And then the director of football can come along and say, we've got X, Y, and Z. What do you think? Knowing that he's probably going to like them, as opposed to two forces working against each other, competing, with regards to two philosophies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that honestly that makes sense. You want the manager to he knows about the tactics, right? The director of football won't know unless he's had experience in management. But I think the worry is and especially with me, it's the type of players that he wants. I think that what worries a lot of fans, like players from Premier League proven players, average players. I know that there's an excuse that he can just turn everyone into like a world beater, but I think we're at a stage now that if we want to compete with like the best clubs around the world, we need the quality players. And I know, for example, Rafael Leao, that was mentioned last night in the group chat. But a player like him can if we had him on Sunday against Everton, he would have changed that whole game. We need players like that maybe they do go a bit missing throughout the whole season, but a player like that we needed in the games like Everton, Fulham at home, Bournemouth at home, Brighton. Them players can make us win those games, and we're challenging at the top of the league. So I don't know, but like I said, I'm trusting Howe. I told him I'll give it another season, but we have to see what we do in the summer.
That's big of you.
I mean, listen, I'm just going to hit on a couple of points. If it was as simple as you've just said there, and I suppose Tim and Tiger going on what you're saying there. If it was as simple as, we know Eddie is a workaholic, right? He lives and breathes football, coaching, whatever. But all the big teams have a director of football because what they want to try and do is work. You can be a jack of all trades, but you can't master any of them. And I think the problem for me is, if we push in Eddie one way or the other, is it going to deter him doing the job that he's supposed to do? If he's got to spend a lot of time now looking at players, which I would imagine as a coach you do anyway, but I don't want that to deter him from doing the coaching job, which is what he gets paid for. That's the idea of the big clubs making a director of football to do the job that he does. He's the one who'll go and highlight players. Doesn't always necessarily want to buy them. He'll bring them forward to the board meetings with the head coach and say, this is a player who can do this, do this, do this. This is the type of money they're looking for. Does it fit your plans? Now, to me, it doesn't look like there's a relationship like that between Mitchell and Howe. And you guys have quite rightly said, and open the door to saying, this is the player that I want, which is Eddie Howe style of play. And if you can't get me that, I don't want anybody else. And I'm going back to and addressing the Mark Gay situation last summer. And it seems to me as if it didn't matter what Paul Mitchell brought to the table, I don't think Eddie Howe would have wanted anyway. And there's somebody who's just put in the chat, and I was going to ask you, guys, I wanted to highlight it, but just as I was talking, it moved. There you go. Mark, did Eddie Howe's illness give him a moment of introspection? A moment of introspection in the season's triumphs gave him power to issue an ultimatum. I mean, we've all said. That's what I'm saying. It is one of them.
He definitely changed from his first conference back after he had his illness.
Yeah.
He was more prick. He was a different
boy, wasn't he?
No more Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah.
And maybe that could have had something to do with it. Maybe he's lying in his hospital bed.
Sometimes you can feel how vulnerable you are when you're not there.
His lucky stars and thinking,
Yeah.
right, bollocks with this. I've been nice guy for long enough. I'm now going to show me true colours. And good on him as far as I'm concerned. Power to his elbow.
I mean, it's going to be an interesting few weeks now, isn't it? Was it 10 days in the first window, and then it closes again. So it is going to be.
And how crazy is that, by the way? Because of
it's to support these guys in the World Cup, isn't it? That's what I'm saying. And according to it, there's a lot of managers out there want to go out with their new signings, so they can integrate them into their side and the tactics early rather than later on in the season. So I understand it to a point, but it's like we're bending over.
We've got a question here for Tim. So if that's the case, Tim, no one in the world would hire DOFs.
It depends on the club itself and the manager as well. So like I already said anyway, a lot of clubs do hire director of footballs because the remit is to sign players.
Yeah.
So manager at that club or the manager that follows the appointment of the DOF is happy for those players to be signed. So, like I said at the start, there's not necessarily a right way or wrong way. It's to do with the relationships of the people at that particular club. So, obviously clubs do have directors of football, but what we have is we hired a manager in Eddie Howe without having a director of football in place. You would normally want to do it the other way around. But once Howe has been hired and then had a hand in transfers in the January window and has had a working relationship with the chairman from that point onwards, and working closely with the chief scouts, that dynamic is then set up. That's different to other clubs, and it's also the same at other clubs. They'll work that way as well.
That's exactly the point, Tim, isn't it? It's the chronology.
Yeah,
which came first, the chicken or the egg? If the manager's there first and doing a bloody good job, by the way, then is it
exactly
the right strategy to and Eddie's put up with it because he seemingly didn't have the power, and I think the fact that he wasn't backed in 3 transfer windows proved that he didn't have the power.
I think part of it is whether you have the club structure, isn't it? Whether it's a manager that you want in place or it's a head coach. I think
and that's the point. It's a question. If it's the DOF,
you have a coach
who has the final say in appointing the coach, then that's a whole different ball game, isn't it?
Whereas I think if you've got a manager in place, you have a head of recruitment then, not a DOF.
Yeah,
because the manager has to be in charge of everything.
I agree, but I think that's it, mate. I think that's a nail on the head in terms of what you're saying, Gary. Like, we don't want to be left behind with other clubs having a DOF, but I think it's, for me anyway, it's more about, sometimes these titles are like schematics. It's like, it doesn't really, it's one title might mean one thing to one appointment and mean something different to another appointment at another club. Do you know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
if you've got, I don't want Eddie Howe to be doing everything at the club. Like you say, then it's a case of not honing his skills as a manager on the training pitch and in the dugout. So I'm not saying Eddie Howe should be running the club that way. I just think you've got people like Steve Nixon there, whatever title he has, whether it's chief scout or director of football, you could say is neither here nor there in terms of what are the roles that they are carrying out. And if Steve Nixon, with his team of scouts, are liaising with Eddie Howe and being able to swiftly go through targets and pull up targets that are going to work, then that takes us forward, just like it would if you had a DOF, but it's a different title. I think it's not all black. Well, pardon the pun, it's not black and white in terms of having a DOF or not having a DOF. I think.
Yeah, I agree with you, but that's what I said. I don't want a jack of all trades and do half jobs in both areas. I want somebody who can contribute fully to his role. And like I said, I know, you look at Eddie Howe, you look at all the interviews that he's done. He is a workaholic. He takes his work home with him. He works on the boards all the time. But is that going to be enough? Are we going to go? I've just seen a comment in there from Brandt saying about, if we re-sign Longstaff, Willock, and Wilson, is that going to be enough going forward? Because Eddie Howe hasn't got the time to go and look into the market.
Whoa, hang on. Do you not think that Eddie Howe knows?
I'm asking a question. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Would you be happy if we re-signed these three players and bought in others? Would you be happy?
No.
But that's what I'm saying. What I don't want us to keep going over the same names, the same bodies that we've seen previous. I think, with the DOF in situ, he's worked since July in the market. This is how I look at Mitchell. He's had all this time. We're on the build-up now of opening the gates to say we can now go and spend for the first time in three windows. And then the news breaks and you start questioning what the hell has happened again now. And that's what I said. To me, this sounds more of a bit of egg on the face of Newcastle board, because we can't keep directors of football in situ. And you've got to start questioning, are we stable behind the scenes? Because to me, it doesn't sound as if we are.
Here we're going again is saying Dougie Friedman, our number one choice, signs for a Division 2 Saudi team controlled by PIF last season. Maybe Palace played hardball and this was our walk around paying, save Newcastle having to pay the release fee.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing before I go, because I need to go.
Yeah.
It was about what Brandt said about Wilson, Longstaff, and Willock. Like, can you see how being ruthless though to those kind of play? You can see that.
Yes.
I don't know, man. I don't think he gets rid of. Like he's saying, you are gonna go.
This is the new hardball Eddie Howe.
Oh God.
Only time will tell. Only time will tell.
If they go in the summer, I'll be okay. Howe has changed then, But right now,
you're just waiting for him to slip up.
Wait, listen. I said in the chat, he can win the league, but if he fucks up in the Tyne-Wear derby both matches, he's gone. He's gone, mate.
I know. Listen. Eddie was asked about that the other day, and he what do you think about the derbies coming back? And he said he hadn't given it much thought, but he's looking forward to it now. And that's what he said. It's good for the Northeast. He puts the Northeast back on the map in the Premier League, and I think that is exactly where we need to be. For me, I am at this point. I was really pleased of getting. I've said before of Paul Mitchell coming on board, and I don't mind who gets the job. I have no issues about who gets the job. My concern is the timing of this now, and it's a case of I was really looking forward to going away. The 1st of June for a few days. And now I'm like, oh, God. I'm deflated again. And that's what I said. It's a case of...
Why be deflated, man?
Because, like I said, to me, all these names that were earmarked of potential signings could be completely gone now.
Well, you say no. You see, I think the contrary. I think that part of that conversation will have been, maybe we're pulling names out the hat, but let's say Mbeumo and Delap. And Eddie made a point of saying on Friday, I think it was, in the presser, that it's essential. I'll have his quote somewhere from Friday.
Okay, guys, I gotta go. So
Okay,
take care.
thanks
See you
for
later,
coming on.
Tiger.
Cheers, Tiger.
Guys,
Yeah.
bye.
Where's the exact thing he said in the presser? 2 seconds.
Just while you're looking for it, Win, who do you think will be the person that'll do the negotiations now?
His exact quote was, "We've got to be ready to pounce in the window." That was his quote at the presser on Friday.
I'm just saying, do you think they'll still let Mitchell do the negotiations for players now?
No.
No.
So who'll
No,
be
not now. He's not now. They've agreed, and Manic's 91 here has made a point. We've already seen teams signing players now pre-window, right? Players that are available to come, and obviously the parental clubs are giving them the permission to talk to other teams. Now, is that another reasons why we've had the news now? Is because there was no agreement between both director of football and the head coach to go and sign these players? Because, like I say, there is opportunities to sign now before the window opens.
And that's exactly the point that I'm making. I think that's what's going to happen now. And that there's obviously been some friction. Listen, we know there's been friction between Mitchell and Howe. It's common knowledge, more or less, despite all the public making up and all the bollocks to go with that. It's going to. I think things will start happening much quicker now that he's gone.
Okay, I mean, it's all speculation. Isn't it?
You'll enjoy Turkey listening.
Yeah, thank you. I will. Honest to God, I can't wait. Yeah, love it. We cannot afford to overspend on players. Howe needs to look abroad, and Mitchell was right in when we need to be broaden our horizons and shop abroad. Now, that was the one thing about Mitchell. He had got links to, obviously, a lot of the Red Bull clubs and things like that. But I don't know about you.
My honourable friends, I give you Botman, I give you Bruno, I give you Isaac.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. It's not as if we haven't already hit the market in Europe. But again, we talk about, lots of rumours about Premier proven players coming to Newcastle. And it seems to follow Eddie Howe's mantle about, that's all he wants. I don't think that is. I think he wants the right players, to fit the right formation type of thing. And I don't know whether that has already been sorted. Now, all these rumours that we've got with these linked to these Premier League players, have they come from the club? Or have they just come from journos that are putting, the likes of Mbeumo's name in a hat? We don't know. Like I said, the signings we've had previous, we've never heard of until we signed them. So is that going to be? Is that already in situ? Like you said, the timing's now because Eddie wants to act sooner rather than wait until the 1st of July. 1st of June, sorry. So it is going to be an interesting one. Any other comments, guys, before we say?
Well, we can keep on. Have you got to get away, guys?
Not particularly. I'm just thinking of the time. That was all.
Well,
we're over an hour into the show. That's
Yeah, there's loads of comments still to
go on then. Let's have some comments.
Are you okay, Tim and Borky, for the time being?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's have a look at some of these comments.
I was just going to ask a quick question when you get the
cool.
Do you think the decision was definitely made on Sunday is simply down to the fact there's been no leaks, there's been nothing in the press about this coming out? Do you think
I think it was.
Made on Sunday?
Yeah, I think there was an ultimatum given.
In fact,
there was a meeting, wasn't there?
After the match.
It was strange that Craig Hope, when he was doing his post-match from outside the Melbourne main entrance on Sunday.
Yeah.
And he said, right now, And he pointed upstairs.
Upstairs, yeah.
Right now, Eddie's talking to the chairman. And I'm absolutely certain that that's where it's all come to a head. And I'm equally certain, and this will, when we hear about it all in years to come, Eddie's gone in there with all the power at his fingertips and said, right, here's how it's going to be, sir.
I think
take
like,
it or leave it.
Yeah, I think it's been kind of established probably in that meeting and kind of confirmed in that meeting that their relationship was not working, in that they weren't on the same page. I mean, I know Brand's there saying about how splitting his dummy out. I mean, that's a bit. I'm not sure if it was as black and white as that, but
because he's
well,
into that closet Eddie out.
Well, I think obviously it goes back to last summer.
Brand.
So we've had last summer. We've had the kind of disagreement between the two, where again, to me, it was ridiculous to appoint a director of football, a footballer, without establishing the structure of how that was going to work. That was the first mistake. You know, Eddie Howe was appointed as manager first in a time where we couldn't hang around. We were bottom 3. We need to get a manager in the ASAP. So last summer, if they wanted a new director of football, that should have been established with Howe as to how they want that to work. If they wanted DOF to sign players, they should have said to Howe, that's how we want to work. If you don't like, we'll get another manager as well.
If you remember, that's more or less what did actually happen, because it came out quite publicly then at the Austrian training camp, that there'd been a bust-up between Howe and Darren Eales.
Yeah.
With regard to the DOF.
Yeah. And I can understand that from Eddie Howe's point of view. Like, regardless of what you think of how you think a system or what we should be doing in terms of that system, if you look at it from Eddie Howe's point of view, like any manager's point of view, if you're preparing in the summer and then suddenly you're told you're not part of this, you're kind of told this is the new director of football, like you weren't saying that, and he is going to have some say potentially in signings, etc. And it's blurred lines as to how it's going to work. Any manager is going to be like, well, this is a bit messy. Like,
yeah. And what happened at that time, I believe anyway, was that the PIF backed Darren Eales, who in turn backed Paul Mitchell, and Eddie was kind of more or less told, look, this is the way it's going to be, get on with it. So he's continued doing the job, and it festered over to Japan, when there'd obviously been ructions going on behind the scenes, and that come to this joint statement that they made, where they said, you know, everything's all roses now. You know, we've cleared the air. We've drawn. If you remember, we've drawn the boundaries. That was the phrase that came out at the time. We've drawn the boundaries, and obviously, somebody's been trying to overstep those boundaries this time round. I think the PIF have backed Mitchell throughout the last 2 windows. And this is why, one of the reasons why, you know, you can argue we've had no money as well, but one of the reasons is that they've said, no, we are only going to buy players that Paul Mitchell gives the okay to. And now Eddie, on Sunday, with all the power in his hands, with his newfound oomph from, you know, being at death's door, has come out and said, right, well, no. Times they are a-changing. This is what's going to happen now. If you don't like it, bye-bye. I can go and get a job anywhere I want. And he can.
That's exactly what Benny's more or less saying here. Look, cast your minds back last summer. Off the back of now European football, things were shaking up. The Eddie was linked with the England job, and he wrestled back control. Perfect timing for Eddie, I suppose. And it did seem as if it was one of those times in Eddie's career where he was wrestling a little bit of control at Newcastle with the chance of, even though it's come obviously out now that he wasn't even interviewed for the England job. But there was definitely something there, wasn't there?
Well, listen, I think if Eddie had wanted the England job, he would have got it.
Do you
know,
think
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
been
despite the public, he was never approached and all of this.
Do you think he's been quite clever as well, waiting until this window when we're at maximum for spend for players? So he's maybe thought this is the chance that if I'm going to get the players I want, I'm going to go in and tell them what I want now.
Yeah,
I think in that meeting, I think they've went in, and Eddie Howe in this meeting has said, "I think we should do X, Y, and Z," and Paul Mitchell has said, "In my opinion, is we should do something else." It might not have been completely opposite, but there might have been some differences there. So then you've got the board there sitting there thinking, well, you know what, we might have to decide here as to just picking one of these. It's not working. They're not on the same page. So you know what, we might have to just streamline this and maybe get somebody else, because they're not on the same thought of pattern. So I just think they've had that meeting and it's became absolutely clear that it's not going to work. So what's the point in it's annoying, but what's the point in just carrying on if it's not going to work? You might as well either get somebody else in that is going to work, or continue with, like I said, Chief Scout, etc., Steve Nixon.
Yeah, we've got a very stern-looking Jefferson
Oh,
in the
come
middle.
on,
Look
Jeffo.
at those eyes.
Aye. Can you hear us, my dude?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, can hear
loud and
you.
clear.
I don't think you can hear us, though.
Can you not hear us?
No,
Oh, I think my picture's frozen.
No, you're good, man.
You're good.
We can
Okay,
hear
let me do it via my laptop. Hold on, I'm coming back.
Okay. Yeah, he's struggling. But I mean, it is interesting to see how it all pans out. I mean, like I said, there's definitely been. I mean, people will always speculate that there's going to be. That's when it happened. It just seems very coincidental to have this meeting on Sunday and this news break on Tuesday, doesn't it?
I don't think there's any coincidence there.
If this wasn't, like I say, a meeting where two immovable objects didn't, make the ultimatum, it's either him or me, which you choose which one you want to piff. Like I say, there's only going to be one winner when you look at what Eddie Howe's achieved under his mantle. So it is an interesting one. But you look at it for what it is. I'm not going to slight Paul Mitchell for what he's achieved. He's done wonders for the youth, the academy, the girls team, and everything else. I just wished he was able to bring in a couple of players to unknown players that he's done previously. And like I said, maybe that isn't what Eddie wants. Maybe that's just names that he hasn't seen, or players that he doesn't fully understand or want. And obviously Mitchell's pushing for these people to come on board, playing staff wise. It seems really weird for me to see two grown men type of thing. You say spit the dummies out, whatever you want. I don't know.
I'm just not accepting that expression at all in terms of Eddie. What Eddie's done is he's played his power hand. That's not spitting your dummy out. That's him saying, look, back me or sack me. Yeah,
but that's what I'm saying. He's given the ultimatum, isn't he? I'm not saying he spit his dummy out, but he's given the ultimatum to say it's me or it's it's my way or the highway type of thing.
I mean, listen, who knows?
Exactly. I mean,
it
we don't
could
know.
well have been PIF coming into that meeting and saying, listen, Eddie, you're doing an absolutely fantastic job. We weren't altogether sure that you were capable of doing it. You've proven us all wrong. So from now on, you've got the upper hand. You've got the say on everything. And Paul Mitchell saying, hang on a minute then. And it's Paul Mitchell spitting his dummy out.
Yeah,
Saying,
absolutely.
Well, I'm not working with that.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's somebody's picking.
We don't know what's gone on.
No, exactly. Alexander Luddy here, it takes one world-class signing for this to be moot point. Eddie said he's aimed to act fast. He has the credit in the bank, so he deserves our patience. And I think enough said. And I do think there's a really valid point to that when it comes to it, because he's got the respect of everybody, hasn't he? Because of what he's done, and he's moved the club
with
forward
his hands tied behind his back
without having the money available. But like I said, to me, the only thing that looks a little bit of a sour grape is, we've lost 2 DOFs and a board member with Amanda, and it just puts us under a little bit of a spotlight when it comes to stability in the background. And again, we won't know the full details of what's gone on. And
let's have a look at some of these comments.
Go on, go for it. We'll be
for a
waiting.
while now. Steve Nixon's been fantastic. Oh yeah, wait a minute, we've got Jefferson back. Steve, can you hear us now, Jefferson?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes, dude. Yeah.
Come on,
go on then, dude. What's your thoughts?
What are those eyes saying?
Man, I can't say too long because I don't want to get in trouble at work. But this is important stuff, man. I'm sure you guys have already covered a lot of stuff. My take in it is that I'm personally disappointed because I've sort of done the full circle and sort of started warming to Eddie again and trusting him and all that. And I don't care if anyone doesn't want to call it out. There was some real infantile behaviour last summer. It was very evident the way it played out. But it felt like as a dysfunctional family, we managed to get through that, progress really well throughout the year. And we could see some of these signings coming through, the Georgian boy, the Turkish boy, the Spanish boy. And then obviously some of the players we've been linked to, particularly this Espanyol goalkeeper. Again, you could see the sort of hallmarks of Mitchell type signings. And it's not about tribalism, whether you're Eddie in, Eddie out, if you like Eddie or you don't. This is about Newcastle United. And at the end of the day, we are modernising as a club. Managers are becoming extinct. You have head coaches, and the head coach's role is to very simply coach the first team. They have a little bit of an opinion on transfers, but transfers is down to the director of football. You need someone with strategy and a strategic vision because it oversees the recruitment, it oversees the academy. So it's not even just about this immediate summer window. It's about the future of the club. And that's what people should be upset about. There should be no power struggles going on. This isn't a game. This is the future of the club. And that is why I'm fuming. So I've got no bias. I know I've made no secret that I've been frustrated with Eddie in the past. It's not about that. It's about the club. It's not acceptable. And what I'm worried about is when you've got someone in this position, there needs to be checks and balances. So someone put in the group, very valid, that, wait and see who comes in. There's a difference if it's a like-for-like replacement where we're getting literally another quality director of football coming in. But if it's going to be the likes of Richard Hughes or Dougie Friedman, who are Eddie's friends, I'm going to be even more fuming because the club is more than one guy. And I know he's delivered us a trophy, but it doesn't make you invincible. We are a club. It's not Eddie Howe FC, it's Newcastle United FC. And I just think some people need to get out of that a bit and just get with it. Because when you look at Paul Mitchell, you've looked at what he's done with Southampton, Virgil van Dijk, Sadio Mane, Spurs, Heung-min Son. Look at how he transformed Monaco. We've seen snippets of what he could do. He's managed to get us a decent fee for Almiron and for Kelly. He's not even got started yet. So at the very minimum, even if Eddie was unhappy with this guy, give him one window, see how it works. It's all about the betterment of the club. Sometimes we work with people who we don't like, but at the end of the day, no one can question his resume or how good he's been for other clubs. So I'm a bit worried now. It's just going to be Premier League proven FC, a lot of overpriced British players. And now we've seen a little bit now that this whole, situation with Gurhey, there's a bit of form here where he was offered Malik Tiao. He said no. He pursued with Gurhey. That sabotaged our summer. Because people saying we had no money, but why are we bidding nearly 60, 70 million for Gurhey? because one man wanted him. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, a director of football is the boss of the head coach. What would we do in our roles if we started acting up, right, and getting aggy with our boss? We'd be gone. So this is the
Well,
wrong way around.
well, hang on. That's
I don't
exactly
know what's going on here.
that's
But
exactly what Eddie's done.
fuming,
That's exactly what Eddie's done with his boss. He's gone
fuming.
he's gone to his boss and said, "Take your pick. Either I'm the boss or Mitchell's the boss. If Mitchell's the boss, I'm off."
But that's childish, Win. That's
Not childish.
It is
Not
childish.
at all.
He's the manager. He's the head coach of the
No,
club.
he's not. Yeah, he's the manager. That's what he
And
is.
look at what a pivotal time it is. Look at what a pivotal time it is for the
Yeah.
club. So we've just about
Champions
gathered
League,
some
we've
kind of
just won
momentum.
our first trophy under this manager.
So,
Nothing to do with Paul Mitchell.
so
Well, I
how
think
many
what I would
years?
say is,
How
I
many
think
years? As far as I'm concerned, the club has existed longer than 3 years.
there's a lot of
Very
assumptions going on in terms of like,
very unsuccessfully until the last 3 years.
So we've been massively unsuccessful apart from the time Eddie's been here.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
So what about Kevin Keegan? What about somebody
What did he
Robson?
win? What did Keegan win?
Okay, so what you were the one that were telling us about the 50s win, right? When we won cups and leagues. So
Correct. We didn't have a director of football then. Man United never had a director of football.
Yeah, but we're modernising.
Arsenal under Wenger never had a director of football.
The time
Man City
done.
Man City have got a director of football, but don't tell me that Pep doesn't have the final say about who comes in there.
I'm sure they find a way to work together.
yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's the key,
It's
Jefferson.
a
I think
soap
like,
opera.
yeah, I think, I mean,
about the
like I said,
hierarchy.
I think there's some assumptions in terms of who said what. Do you know what I mean? I think there's obviously been a meeting, and I think it's unfair to kind of assume, you know, that this person said this and that person said that. If I was to make a guess, like I said before, I think they've probably everyone in that room has had their say on kind of what they would do going forward, and if those viewpoints haven't aligned, that's not a case of somebody, you know, spitting the dummy out. That's then PIF taking on board what they've heard and making a decision as to what will work going forward and what won't work going forward. I mean, I agree in terms of like the youth signings and stuff, Jefferson, all the young players we've signed.
We've all said that.
Yeah, that to me, you know, for me, with the director of football, that can still go on for me, and needs to go on. Like I think the crux of it with the whole director of football issue is the senior players and players coming in to the first team. And I think Paul Mitchell, from what I can see, has signed players for the first team at previous clubs. And again, it goes back to the fact that this wasn't sorted out in the first place as to what the structure was, clearly. And I think in terms of final say, you know, to me, I think it isn't one man. It's a combination, and I think all these clubs out there with directors of football, it's still the manager themselves who have a big say in giving that green light to that player coming through the door. So it's not as clear cut as we need to, when other clubs have DOF standing there putting the foot down saying, he's coming through, I don't care what you think, manager, get on with it. Certainly abroad it might be more common, but in the UK, I don't think that is the case. So again, it goes back to the working relationship and being on the same page between the DOF and manager. And we appointed Eddie Howe before the DOF because we had to. So we have to adapt to that. And we have to go forward in the way that, like you say, Jefferson, in the way that works for the club. But ultimately, we can't now change what's happened. We can't, you know, we could just turn around and say, you know what, let's just Eddie Howe, thanks, but golden handshake, see you later. But is that the right thing to do? I don't think it is. So it's now,
of course not.
Yeah.
But
so
for
now,
me, that's a 360 from the board then, because the board brought in Paul Mitchell. So do you see what I'm saying? He was the board's man,
exactly it.
because the process before, where it was Eddie saying, I want this guy, I want that guy, as we saw in the documentary, Mandy and Merdad trying to negotiate deals. You can't operate like that. That's an amateur operation. That's not how football works now. You need the director of football to do those kind of deals, but have a strategic approach to say, look, this is our philosophy. I will help you construct a short list, but they need to be potentially, this short list of players rather than I want that guy, I want that guy, I want that guy. And he did it with Gordon. He's done it with Gurhey. So we've seen it. It's not like it's been plucked out of thin air. So for PIF
and
to
it's
bring
quite
Mitchell in as
successful,
their
isn't it?
guy, but then get rid of him, that suggests, if you read between the lines, particularly how it played out last summer, there's been a power struggle. And I saw the interview with Simon Jordan, right? Now, Simon Jordan agreed with me and said, there was a point where he said, Paul Mitchell is your boss. He said, he's not my boss. We work together. And I said, no. That's the way it works. The director of football.
Okay,
is
so
the
now
boss
it doesn't.
of the head coach.
So now it doesn't.
But it does. Then scrap it. Then scrap it.
No,
let's
no.
just go back to Gaffer, go back to manager, and let's work that 1995. Let's just do it. Let's
the thing is, though, it goes back though what you said about philosophy. I think in terms of, again, signing players for a philosophy for the first team and players who are going to fit in that first team. It goes back to, like, if you have a DOF who is telling Eddie Howe to sign these players that ultimately do not fit in to the team as it is and in the structure that Eddie Howe works towards and how he manages the team, that's not going to work. So there has to be an alignment there. It can't just be the DOF. I know, again, we're talking technicalities in terms of who's the boss, who's this, who's that, who's got these titles. I think we need to get past that. It's about working together, and it's about who is best placed to be able to see a player who can fit into the first team and into a vision and a system that manager is ultimately responsible for on match day and is ultimately going to carry out. So again, having a DOF telling the manager, as it stands right now, who's been in place for a few years, to kind of switch things up is not going to work. So going forward,
we don't know though. We that's the thing, we don't know as well. Obviously, we've seen some targets that have been identified, but you're telling me they couldn't reach a compromise where it's like, all right, let's have 5 targets. You have 3 of yours. I have 2 of mine. I want to get this Spanish keeper in. I don't know. You might have highlighted one flamboyant midfielder, whoever, and Eddie would have said, fine, I want Trafford, I want Ambuemo, I want this person. Like, there was no, we'll find out later on in time.
We don't know really.
But surely they could have worked together for one window, because it's a very evident philosophy where it's like, you might be stubborn in your way, but give someone a chance, and then fine, if it doesn't work, say, I'm sorry, mate, it's not worked. I want to do it my way.
The problem with that, Jeff, is, I know what you mean. I totally know what I mean. The only problem with that is that if 6 months down the line it's not working, it's Eddie Howe will get the sack quite likely, and then
that's the problem,
isn't it? Comes in, and then this
That's
is
what
where
nobody ever looks at the DOF.
We did it his way last time we got into PSR issues.
But football being football,
that was Amanda, that wasn't it?
It sounds like we make excuses for Eddie, but we're not going the other way. He got us into PSR troubles.
Yeah, but Amanda left though, didn't she, because of that?
He bought Matt Target. Does Matt Target play? He bought Chris Wood.
That was a good signing at the time, Matt Target. You can't rewrite that.
We made a loss.
Matt Target was a good signing.
Matt Target, the guy that gets injured because he's got eczema.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he came in and he was part of the players who helped us come back.
So last summer, we could have done with that 15 million we spent on Target. How long has it been since he's played?
I think that's
irrelevant now, because we've signed Hall since.
Jefferson.
But he was brought in to fill a gap when we were in the relegation spots, wasn't he? He was the value.
He played his part. Target played his part when he came in.
I'm just saying exactly the same as Gary. That Target was brought in as a player for that it needed that time. But I don't think you can blame Eddie for that.
No.
I do understand what Jefferson's saying, that there is a worry now that Eddie Howe's going to have too much control over the club, especially with it going to be look like we're going to have pretty much a pretty new board in place. The CEO going and obviously director of football going. Eddie is going to be well established and be able to pretty much control whatever he wants.
And have you got a problem with that?
Slightly, in that what happens if things go wrong and he gets sacked.
Right, so then you can appoint a DOF who can then appoint his own coach, and let's see how well we do then.
But then that's a massive upheaval at the club, isn't it? When if you
Is
you're
it
doing all
really?
that.
Well, is that not a step backwards?
Everybody needs a constructive friend. You know, we
Yeah.
all go off the rails, right? So you need those checks and balances to be like, come on, mate. Do you know what I mean? And they could play each other in that role. But if you've just got another mate that's gonna be like, yeah, I'll back you, do this, do that,
Jefferson,
we're just gonna tank.
Jefferson, my problem is I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you mean. I do not know why you have a reticence to give Howe the power to decide who he wants to play in his team. I don't understand. So yeah, I'm thick.
So think about Ashworth, right? I didn't cry over no spilt milk when Ashworth left. But the difference is with Paul Mitchell, we got truly one of the best in the business. And the proof is in the pudding because of what he's done at those other clubs. And we know this because of the 14 years of stagnation under Ashley. We need to play catch up. We need to play catch up.
Yeah.
So having a director of football with a strategy that is proven he can grow clubs financially off the pitch and be able to recruit players who have sell-on value.
Okay.
I repeat, the likes of Virgil van Dijk and Sadio Mane. Look at what he did at Southampton. Look at Spurs.
Whoa.
Look at Monaco. Monaco were in debt. Monaco were in huge debt. And look at the likes of Chukwuemeni, right?
Yeah.
He went for 80 million.
He bought
This is what we're giving up here, guys.
He bought at Monaco. He bought a load of young talent. And he's done that at Newcastle so far since he's been here. Thank you very much for doing it. So as a recruitment, as head of recruitment, fantastic, great. Go and spot all this talent, bring it in, we'll develop it, and so on and so forth. Re-employ him as a head of recruitment, not as a director of football above Eddie Howe. And this is the whole point of this showdown at the weekend is deciding the hierarchy. And Eddie's gone in there on Sunday, or Piff have gone in to Mitchell on Sunday and said, from now on, the hierarchy's changed. Eddie's at the top of the hierarchy, and you are working for him, as opposed to the other way around. And
That's speculation, surely.
Happier. Of course, it's speculation.
Come on now. I think
Why
Eddie's...
Why else? Why? How come the timing has happened the way it's happened?
Because obviously it's a pivotal moment when you're getting short lists of targets. You need to be having negotiations. They've clearly had disagreements about who those targets are. But
exactly.
But I feel they could have reached a compromise for the betterment of the club.
They haven't been able to. They haven't been able to.
But they weren't able to last summer.
Correct.
So there's a common denominator here.
Exactly.
Eddie, he's throwing his toys out the pram.
No,
Mitchell, I'm not getting my way. I'm not getting my way. Blah blah blah. But you're the manager of the club.
So back me or sack me.
Thing is, though, you could say that about Paul Mitchell. Do you know what I mean? It's like you could say he's throwing his toys
But he hasn't had these issues at other clubs, Tim. It's embarrassing.
But he hasn't stayed long at other clubs.
He didn't have this issue at Monaco, Spurs, or Southampton. We've given the manager too much power.
Eddie never had an issue with Dan Ashworth, to be fair.
Well, apparently he did. Yeah,
did
apparently he did, because it was Amanda who was doing a lot of the negotiating for Eddie. Because if you saw obviously we all saw the program on Prime. It was Amanda who was in the taxis a lot of the time doing the talking between Eddie. He wants this player, he wants that player. So what was Dan Ashworth doing? What was the point in having Dan Ashworth? It seems to me
he was setting up the smoke screens for Barella.
It sounds as if to me that, like I say, there's a step over somewhere between the lines between Eddie and another person. Now, it sounds very much to me as though there's only Darren Eales on Mitchell's side in the boardroom, because obviously their relationship that they had at Spurs. So, is it the fact that Mitchell just doesn't feel as though he's got a say in anything in Newcastle moving forward? And if that is the case,
in the first team,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, he's been given free roll more or less in the academy. And like I said, for me, that's the area now. I don't want to go stagnant.
And that's his
Yeah.
area of expertise.
Well, exactly. And
Let's
this is
see
what I
Dominic
come back to in
Calvert-Lewin
terms
then,
of
innit?
DOF role.
Let's get
You know,
Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Let's get Trafford in it. Let's
what
get
I
all
come
these
back to in
rubbish
terms
players,
of the
man.
DOF
Let's
role,
get them
because
in.
the DOF role, I think, for me, is different in different clubs. And when we're hiring a DOF, to me, it doesn't seem that clear from the outside as to where these lines are they're drawn when we hire these people. And this is what I kind of go back to, in that if we are, I don't think we are hiring these people, these DOFs, and saying to them, you have full control and you can sign players over the manager. I don't think we're signing the DOF. To me, again, it's speculation. None of us know all the details, but it looks like to me we're kind of signing these DOFs, and the lines are a little bit blurred, and we're kind of hoping that things will work out. And that lack of clarity is causing these problems, where then you've got people who, I think Dan Ashworth was more of a backseat person than Mitchel, by all accounts, I think, in terms of how they operate, in terms of the first team. But I think that's where these clashes are coming, because then maybe Mitchell's he's getting restless, thinking, well, I want to be signing players. I sign players at my other clubs. I want to do it here, and it hasn't been clarified before he came. So that I don't really blame him. I don't blame Eddie Howe. I blame the club for not clarifying these lines before the agreement's in place. It doesn't seem like it is.
No, according to Sky Sports, there's nobody in mind to replace Mitchell. But then I've just read that they're looking at more towards a technical director more than a director of football. So, what do you guys think about that? A technical director rather than a director of football?
It's just handles, isn't it? To me, it's all about the hierarchy.
Yeah,
but is that not moving the as Jefferson was just saying? Isn't that just moving the problem wider? Because now you're going to have nobody above Eddie Howe. It's going to be Eddie Howe's decision. And again, we go back to the elite side of things. Is it too much for Eddie to do on his own? We've gone to the days of Alex Ferguson.
I'm sure he won't be
likes.
doing it on his own. He will appoint a recruitment team.
What, his nephew, yeah? His nephew.
Why not?
Because he's amazing, isn't he? He's much better than Paul Mitchell. This is a joke, man. It's just so annoying, because we've built such good momentum, and despite the last day of the season, where people are annoyed, but we managed to shake that off and be like, you know what, let's look forward to a summer, and then this happens. It becomes a soap opera, and as always, we have to do things the hard way. I just think the board should have just stood firm and said, "This is our guy, Eddie. Make it work. Make it work."
Would you rather Jefferson that they just let Eddie walk out?
Well, if he's walking out, that's infantile and childish, because I'm not being funny. This is the biggest job Eddie's ever had in his life.
But I'm saying,
So for him to walk away from us, he's foolish.
And he's done it pretty well, hasn't he?
He's done all right, yeah. He's done all right. He's done all right, yeah. We nearly choked on the last day. What I don't get is we're talking like Eddie's the second coming of Christ. He's worrying. It's cultish behaviour. Like it feels like you can't criticize him. You can't say he's done anything wrong. He's perfect. Madness.
I criticise him.
Madness.
I hear fans on this channel all the time going on about Bobby Robson and treating him like that. And he wasn't a messiah. And neither was Keegan. Keegan was great. Bobby Robson was great. But neither of them were perfect.
Dummy spitting.
Yeah. Bobby wouldn't
have signed Bobby alone.
Bobby wouldn't have signed unless he increased his wages. He's done the lower wages.
Yeah, listen, nobody's bigger than the club, right? And that is factual, isn't it? Just going to put this on the screen. Bear with me a second. Thanks, Chris. Eddie Howe FC, when do they realise EHFC home kit win? Yeah. It is weird. I totally agree there has to be some stability within the club, because we, at this present moment in time, it's a mockery. It's a mockery to the globe, to keep seeing these people.
How is it a mockery for a club that have won their first trophy in 70 years, qualified for the Champions League? Tell me how that's a mockery.
Because it doesn't. It looks like you're a one-man team. It looks like it's my way, or there is no way. And like I said, Eddie Howe has got his cards well stacked in his favour, but it only takes half a season win for all those deck of cards to collapse if he doesn't get it right. And I always say, in any room, in any walk of life, when you're brainstorming, more heads are better than one when you're looking at a plan of action.
Do you think part of Mitchell's concern might have been the fact that at times Eddie on the bench has put two keepers on the bench rather than bring somebody up from the youth? So Mitchell's going out signing these players.
What's the point?
What's the point in them doing it? Because they're never going to get in the squad, because Eddie just doesn't seem to look at the youth team at all.
Well, and I think that has probably been another angle of Mitchell's upset, if you like, because at the end of the day, we've seen all these players come in and then be loaned out virtually straight away to get game time, which there isn't an issue with that. I have no problems with that. But when you've got two keepers on the bench and you've got half-decent players playing at under 21s level and achieving really high ratings, and again, I go to Kowal, I think that there was an emphasis on Kowal coming back into the first team when his confidence was back. Not even a mention of the poor kid.
Yeah, I think that to me is kind of, I think there should be like a balance really to this. I think, again, for senior players coming into the first team straight away, I just don't see it working where the DOF tells the manager, you are signing him and he's playing. But I think it's when you come into signing these kind of 17, 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds, whatever, I think there should be a route. The manager should allow a route into the team potentially. And like you say, instead of having two goalkeepers on the bench, I agree with you. I think I would have liked to have seen more young players on the bench and getting more minutes under the belt. So to me, that's more of like, if there's an area of concern, that's more it, as opposed to wanting a DOF to be signing all of the players for the first team and established players. And we need to ensure, especially like obviously with PSR and that, it is important that we maximise our ability to bring youth through, whether it's signing young players or bringing through the local lads. So yeah, I think that needs to be, the board should be looking at that and encouraging that. But the problem though is that if that is Eddie Howe's kind of, if that's a weak spot for Eddie Howe and he's not doing that, then you are in a conundrum, because again, go back to before, we hired Eddie Howe first before any DOF. So, and then he's went on to do really well. So like you're kind of stuck in a way, because it's a kind of picking your poison. Yeah, what do you pick?
But Gary,
do you know what I mean? Like, he's got his faults there, but then do you sack him? I just don't see how we can get rid of him. Obviously, like, there's no way I would do that right now. So like, you know what I mean? It's a difficult situation that way.
But Gary, you watch a lot of the under 21 stuff.
Yeah.
How many times have you turned round and said, there's a couple of players who are doing really well in the under 21s, but no way are the first team ready yet?
A number of times.
How many times have you said that?
A number of times. But what I'm saying to you is, what is the point in having players like Kowal, who his numbers have spoken volumes towards the latter end of the season. Yeah. But you're still keeping two keepers on the bench. Now, as a young'un who played at a decent level, when you're constantly being knocked by the senior team, what does that do to your confidence going forward? If you've got two keepers, and the second keeper, I mean, to be fair, has just got a tracksuit on. The first choice keeper on the bench has got no chance of playing. So what is the point in putting a second keeper on there? Well, for me, by coming up into the bench, you may not get a game. It just puts an arm around your shoulder to say that you're being seen to be doing a good job.
Yeah, because that second keeper should be replaced
Absolutely.
Not with an unproven young'un who's not.
But he did that with Neve.
Hang on.
But when we've got 9 substitutes these days, you could give them
and
just
those seats on the bench should be replaced by the likes of Gordon, Barnes, Murphy, who themselves have been replaced by better players in the first team.
Listen, I think
what we should have on the bench.
I think it's going to be an interesting window for Eddie Howe in this transfer window. You know, it's come out and it's quite open now that he's got money to play with. But you know, decisions now are going to be, everybody's going to be scrutinising Eddie Howe, aren't they? Now going forward, if he doesn't,
and rightly so,
he's made it harder for himself.
That's what I'm saying. It's not made it easier for himself. And you know, Foxy's put in here about the technical director, and then he goes on to say, it tells me that Eddie wants total transfer control by bringing in a technical director rather than a director of football, which, like I say, it could come back to haunt him, and bite him on the bottom. But like I say, my biggest concern, and I love what Eddie's done. Don't get me wrong; it's the best season that I've had in my lifetime. But I don't want Eddie to be a halfway house. I want Eddie to be fully focused on the job that he's being paid to do, not spending time away from the first team football to look at prospective buyers down the future. And again, this hinders not having a player in this role. It hinders future stars being brought into the academy because he hasn't got the time to do 5 jobs. It's impossible to do 5 jobs. And that's why I keep talking about brainstorming. When you've got a number of minds sitting around a table, you get more information from
James
the number
Bunce is going to leave.
Individual.
Wouldn't surprise me either, Gary.
No, exactly. I mean, if Dave Bunce,
he's done with the squad. You saw last year, Eddie run them ragged in training. This was evident. The stats are proven. I forgot there was a tweet that D-Man showed me with the days of the injuries had drastically reduced the percentages, and that's because the performance analyst has assisted Eddie and the first team coaching staff. And we know that he's Mitchell's guy. So if he walks away, we're risking going backwards again in terms of having players being run ragged.
Eddie has been fulsome in his praise of Steve Bunce.
He has actually, yeah. He has.
There's no issue between Steve Bunce and Eddie Howe.
But he's Mitchell's man, so it'll be very interesting to see if he remains.
Well, if he doesn't, we'll get another one.
I think, like I said,
listen, under Eddie.
It's worrying, mate. No other club operates like this. It's embarrassing.
I'm not interested in other clubs. I'm interested in my club.
It's embarrassing.
Jefferson, what's embarrassing?
We all laughed at Man United. We all laughed at Man United when they had issues with their hierarchy. They finally got it sorted out, getting Jason Wilcox from Man City, and I forgot another guy that was more respectable rather. Obviously, it will take a while for it to click into gear. The only issue they had was, I think, Ashworth wanted Southgate. They went with Amorim, so he left. So, yes, there's always going to be issues at clubs. But when it wasn't working at Man United, we were all laughing at them.
And remind me, Jefferson, how is it working for Man United now?
Well, again, we don't know. We don't know how this window's going to go. Even at Man City, Pep had it all set up where his Barca mates were there, Soriano and Bergistan. Yeah, and I think one of them is leaving or retired. So they got Hugo Viana in. I'm not sure. Would they have looked at that together? Would he been pleased? But it would have been easy to just say, just bring someone from Barcelona.
Who's got the
final? They got something different.
Who's got the final say on transfers at Man City?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Viana. The reason they got Viana in is because he's transformed Sporting. We know how Sporting have rivaled Benfica and Porto, who have larger budgets than them. So, sometimes you just look out for who's doing good things. And Mitchell has a proven track record. Outside of Eddie's time at Newcastle United, he's not managed at this level. And actually, at Bournemouth, all his transfer dealings were not perfect. He signed the likes of Lys Mousset and Jordan Ibe. I'm sure there's more that others might remember.
Jefferson,
he's not God.
You can point to any manager and point at bad signings.
I don't get it.
you can point at any manager and point at bad and pick out bad signings.
But what I'm saying is, you can make
just look at
mistakes.
what he did at
You need
Bournemouth.
guidance. You need guidance. You need
Didn't need any
guidance, Quinn.
guidance at Bournemouth.
It's not like he's Carlo Ancelotti. He's not won the Champions League.
Not
He's
yet.
won the League Cup.
Not yet.
Let's be realistic about it.
Yeah, let's give him a chance.
But I think he needs to be
Give it a
realistic
chance.
both ways, Jefferson. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think, you know, you say about Bournemouth, I mean, what was the end result? I mean, ultimately, you know, they were in a far better position when he left than when he took over, and had, you know, 5 years in the Premier League. So obviously every manager is going to get some signings wrong, just like any DOF is going to get some signings wrong. You know, I think it's kind of like, I think it needs to be a bit of balance. I think it's unfair to go extreme one way or the other. So like Eddie Howe's job at Bournemouth was amazing, really, when you look at it, and with faults like everyone, you could say,
Like
to
relegation?
different degrees.
Like relegation?
Yeah, but you
Did you
could,
see
Yeah,
their
but
budget?
that's one
It's a
season.
different
I'm talking
level of
about-
football.
No, but Jefferson, this is what I'm talking about. Like, you're just pointing straight at relegation. I'm talking about the bigger picture.
He did
When
bring
he
them up
took
from
over
Division
Bournemouth-
2.
So
Exactly,
the
we're
bigger picture,
in-
we've lost one of the best directors of football going
No,
around.
Jefferson, you're talking about Bournemouth. So Bournemouth came up from the Championship with League One, actually, I think, was it? I'm not sure. but-
Division League 2.
They were
Yeah,
nearly,
League
they were
Two
nearly out the
promotions,
league.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so like, come on, like, there's got to be a bit of balance. Come on, like, and what you're doing is you're pointing to the relegation, you're pointing to Ibe, instead of having that balanced outlook in terms of Eddie Howe and how we operated at Bournemouth. I'm just saying, instead of just jumping to those negatives, let's have a bit of common sense and a bit of clarity and a bit of balance here. I think at the
Look at
same
the players he
time,
bought
yes,
for
I'm not
Bournemouth
sitting
who
here
they
and I'm
sold
not
for
saying Eddie
millions.
Howe is God, and I'm not saying that Eddie Howe should be having 2 goalkeepers on the bench, etc. I think we should be bringing through youth, potentially, you know, more than we're having this season and certainly in the future. But come on, I think there's like both ways. There's extremes here that you can look at it, and you don't want. I think there's far too much negativity in terms of the kind of rhetoric that I'm hearing. And also, yes, I completely understand that you don't want to just say it's Eddie Howe FC. Obviously, there's a balance to it. It's about people working together in alignment. But Jesus Christ, I think I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be jumping down Eddie Howe's throat when I don't know all the facts. And after the season that we've had, should I say the 3 years that we've had since he took over, I just think have a bit of balance, lads. You know what I mean?
So
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
saying that. So you basically what you're saying is you are willing to wait before making a more firm judgment.
Well, what I'm saying is, in this summer, if Eddie Howe and Paul Mitchell were not on the same page, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
What
Is that more of a
if-
detriment for having one person to make the decisions? Is that more or less what you're saying? Two
Well,
players, two immovable objects, making
Yeah,
the wrong choice is more detrimental towards the club going forward, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got this. It's not if it's not working, then you've got what you're supposed to do. Like, just pretend it's working. Like, they've got a decision to make. They could have just ploughed on, and why it isn't working, I'm sure there's nuances on both sides as to why it isn't working. We're not privy to all those exact details, so I think we should have a bit of common sense that way and acknowledge that instead of diving into the extremes on this. Now, yes,
All
we
we've
could.
got is that he's left. That's all we.
I think that is, you know,
So now
what
it's
Tom.
a case of,
Yeah,
do
what
we
Tom's
get
put there
another
is
DOF
perfect.
in?
I think that is
Yeah.
absolutely bang on, because and again the two need to align, and I think that's the problem. They've both obviously got different visions going forward, and I think that we talked previously about the club having this 5-year plan, and that was thrown out the window as soon as Eddie Howe achieved 4 spots, because expectations grew exponentially, and as a fan base, we all grew to wanting more. And, us having Champions League now, 2 out of 3 seasons, we are being spoilt at the moment. And we are overachieving with the monies that we've spent. And I honestly did believe that bringing Paul Mitchell into the fold was a massive step forward to achieving greater things because of his past. Now, for whatever reason, the the relationship between him and the coach Eddie Howe isn't there. So I do agree that something has to give. If the two of them aren't aligned in this future vision, this future plan, then somebody has to move, and it won't be Eddie Howe because of what he's achieved. So I suppose in a way, to say how I feel is, yeah, I'm disappointed in Mitchell going because of the timing. If they're not going to look forward in a role that's coming forward, as in they're not going to bring in another DOF, but they're going to bring in a technical director to look in a different way and give Eddie Howe the future reign, then again, there's only going to be one direction you can point a finger as the owner of a club, and that's towards the coach. But I agree with everybody's point of view. I think everybody has a way of saying it. I just feel disappointed at the time that it's come out. I mean, it surely to me takes less than a year. In January when we didn't buy anybody, why didn't they just say to themselves then, this isn't working? I'm going to walk away from my role as director of football because this isn't working. Why wait till now?
Because
That's what upsets me.
Eddie didn't have the power he has now, did he, at that point? Eddie's
There
got
you
all
go.
the power now to be able to go in and say to them, look, it's my way or the highway, basically.
Yeah. Power.
I
Yeah,
blame
how
the
power.
boards. I blame the boards. I think Tim had a good point earlier about the board. I just think you can't go one direction and change the other. You had Eddie having more control with Amanda and Murdad. Fine, Amanda and Murdad leave, but I don't know, find a way that it remains the status quo by bringing in your own man. Of course, Eddie's going to feel out of joint, like the rug's been pulled underneath him, but then that indicates we're moving in a different direction. So you then have to see it through, or at least give it a chance. You can't then say, no, we're going back the other way now, because the club can't be messed around at such a pivotal time.
No, I don't want to change direction. I'm very, very happy the direction we're going in.
No, but
Very
I'm saying
happy.
we've wasted time in terms of if we hadn't have done that, maybe Eddie would have been able to spend 60 million on Gurhey or whatever it was. And fine, whether it's right or wrong, we would have found out during the season. But we would have just had more clarity. But we've gone in different directions, and I think the way it's playing out is like a soap opera.
Well,
I think it is embarrassing for the club. It is stifling us at a key moment, in our development where we're trying to push forward.
And the way I see it is exactly that, exactly as you've just described. And the key moment has been plunked on the table by Eddie on Sunday and say, which direction do you want to go in? Do you want to go in my direction or do you want to go in your direction? Take your pick. And they've decided, again, quite rightly in my opinion, we'll go in your direction, Eddie. It's working very well so far. Let's not upset the apple cart. Let's keep it going. Thank you very much.
Yeah, listen, I think we've done 2 hours on this subject, and I'm sure it'll be on again later on. So I am going to call the end of the show. Listen, guys, thanks so much for jumping on board, and thank you so much for giving us all your point of view. All very valid points. Like I said, I'm not against what's happened. I just feel as though it's come at the wrong time for me. But thank you so much. And again, thank you for everybody that's out there in the chat. It's been a fantastic show. And we'll be on again at 9 o'clock tonight. When are you guys on doing the Premier League review?
Well, allegedly.
Yeah, that may all change. But we will definitely be on again later on. Boki, thank you so much. Tim, and obviously Jefferson, thanks so much. And obviously my right-hand man over there for all his work in the background. Thanks all. Great show. Thanks for watching. Take care for now.
Still tuned in. Hit the likes, folks. Hit the
Yeah,
likes.
please. Do us a favour. Hit the likes. Take care.
Goodbye
Well,
from
that's-
him, and them down there. Yeah. See you later.
How are the lads?
Lassies and bairns.